styling and structuring considerations for teams. Now, this is something that is a little bit more advanced, right? So this is, if you're a freelancer, you're working with yourself and maybe working with someone every now and then, it's not super impactful. However, there's a couple of reasons why this will be important. Number one is if you do need someone to jump in and support you, or if you do need to, you reach capacity and you need some help, this is something that's going to be super helpful with that. Because if you don't have a clear styling and consistent structuring methodology or framework, then it can be very tricky to get other people in there and helping out without creating more issues than it's worth. And also, if you are working with a team, having consistent styling and structuring considerations makes it much more easy to train people. Plus, it will allow support, updates, aftercare. It makes things way faster. The massive benefits is that it makes life a lot more simple, scalable, stackable, and actually, I didn't add this, but faster, way faster, massively. Oh, I don't even know why I didn't add that. Maybe it's just because of 3 S's. S, 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 F wasn't as cool as catchy, but let's jump into what you're going to learn in this video. Why naming conventions are important. Why we choose client first, where client first breaks down, and I'm also going to touch on what we might end up using scalable plus flexible styles and components. I'm going to give you some examples of actually how, where it breaks down and some examples of what scalable, like what does that mean? And having a starter project that is regularly updated and explaining what that actually looks like. Jumping in, why naming conventions are important. Like I mentioned, building faster. If you don't have naming conventions there's lots of different naming conventions, but being smart about how you use classes, and I'm constantly learning and getting better and wanting the team to upgrade. This is actually our number one focus as a team right now, is how can we improve our naming conventions systems. It enables you to build faster, and I'm going to show you why in a second. More scalable. What does that mean, scalable? Scalable just means that if you have a 500-page website and you have to change the style on every single heading, can you do that in 1 second? That is scalable. If, like when I first started developing, I used to have a different, oh my God, just thinking about this is so painful. On a 5-page website, every heading section, like basically I had a custom class for every single thing on the website, basically. So if I had 5 different pages, that was 5 different heading classes. So if they wanted to update the headings, what would I have to do? I would have to go in and change every single heading because I knew nothing about CSS. More flexible. As you can see, if you have something that is built nicely and the client says, actually, we want to have a grid of 2, not 4. You want to be able to just quickly change that grid so that it fits 2 and not 4 and not have to completely rebuild stuff. And stackable, guys, oh my God, this is gold. You guys are so lucky that you get this this early on in your journey. You're learning this stuff. My goodness. What I've gone through to get this knowledge and to be sharing this is insane. But anyway, just a little moment there for you. Stackable means that can we reuse this on other projects? Massive way to start thinking with these in mind. Scalable, flexible, stackable. Now, why we chose Client First. So if you haven't heard of Client First yet, this has been developed by FinSuite. It's a super organized way of managing your classes. There's guidelines, strategies to help build with Webflow sites, and it's managed by FinSuite, updated by FinSuite. They make adjustments to it in time, but in short, there's things like text size large, section header, padding top, padding bottom. It's really clear when you jump in there and use it. And it's very, very intuitive, quite quick to understand. That is one reason why we started using Client First. And it was very, easy for the team and for clients that wanted to jump in and kind of navigate certain things. However, since using FinSuite, I think maybe in the last 30 to 50 projects that we've probably used FinSuite, my guess is maybe one of them might have actually utilized classes that had some like development knowledge and that it was useful, maybe 2, 3, I can't even think of it. So that's something interesting to note, that we had this because we thought maybe it would be useful for clients, but clients generally, from what we've experienced, don't touch it. If it's a bigger organization and you're handing it over to people that are developers, maybe in that case, it could be useful. I haven't experienced it yet. The second thing is it's insurance for clients. Why? If another Webflow developer jumps in, chances are they're going to know Client First already, or it's going to take them 5 minutes to figure out how Client First works because it's so well documented and it's so intuitive, right? And it's so just descriptive. So you're not working with, very, not arbitrary, but very abstract classes like, BG-1, GL, CL, whatever, just working with random abbreviations and stuff. The third thing, and this is a big deal, is the Reloom and FinSuite ecosystems. So if you're familiar with the Reloom library, this has been a massive plus for our business to be able to utilize all the components that come with this library and all the other bits and pieces and tools that Reloom is using to help speed up the design to development process and that our clients use. Not to mention FinSuite's attributes, which, you can use this on basically anything, but a lot of the solutions that FinSuite already have, their whole ecosystem is such a fundamental, groundbreaking part of our business that we just wanted to make sure that whatever we're doing, it's going to be compatible with what they're doing. So these are some pretty big considerations, just to wrap up as to the naming conventions that you choose before we go further. From what it seems to me, no matter what naming conventions you pick, they're going to have limitations and they're going to be rigid to some extent. And there's compromises with whatever classing system you choose to do. So you just have to pick which compromises that you're okay with. There are other naming conventions that are out there, and we are looking at them at the moment to see if there's some kind of hybrid worth using. This here, however, is where Client First breaks down for us. We've had some really serious scalability issues, and I just want to show you how we kind of work around it. So in this case, I want to show you an example of where we found Client First breaking down for us. In this case, we have this beautiful tab section for a client, which we're just handing over as we speak. Now, in this example, I'll show you what, if we were strictly using Client First, and again, they don't necessarily advocate for this. I know the guys at FinSuite, they also say, hey, just do what makes sense as well, right? They're not just hardcore using these naming conventions on absolutely everything because it doesn't work all the time. Like they're aware of as well, there's always compromises and you have to be flexible. So in this case, if we were using Client First, this would be text size medium. Let's just go with that, even though it's different. And text weight semi-bold. Okay, it's wrong, but as an example, right? Text weight medium, text size semi-bold, and then we'd have to do this one: text size medium, text size semi-bold, text size medium, text size semi-bold. Cool. Let's say we do that. What happens if the client says, can we please make all of these headings smaller or bigger or more bold? I want you to keep in mind we have this same section on 3 different pages. So if we did that, we would have to go through, and this is literally what did happen with one of our team members in training. We had to jump in. The client wanted this change. They'd have to go through. They had to change them all. Text size large, semi-bold. Text size large, semi-bold. You get the idea, right? So instead, removed all those classes from the text. And what we're doing here is, we won't do that one to confuse you. We've got benefits heading, right? So this is just the name of the section. It's the benefits tab section. So the benefits heading. This is how we are managing the heading classes. We are inheriting the class from the div that it's in. So now we can control all of the headings across all of the tab sections. Right? It's that simple. Look, you could create a new heading class, which is, benefits tabs _ heading. Sure. We're still working out what's the best ways to manage things. Is that going to make things more confusing, less confusing? We're still figuring out that stuff as well. So that's an example of something that's scalable, if that makes sense. That means it's a lot easier for us to manage over a large site and over multiple elements and components. But honestly, at this point, that's really the main bottlenecks or issues that we've had with Client First. Other than that, it's been an incredible tool to help our team grow and use the ecosystem like Reloom. But at the moment, it's really that scalability and the ability to be a bit more flexible with components when it's so rigid in certain situations. Which brings me to using scalable and flexible styles and components. We just touched there on how we use our styling to create things a little bit more scalably. And what I want to show you is another way that we actually use components as well. Components are crazy powerful, and that's a whole other video just on itself. We could spend hours looking at components. But what I want to share with you is also the questions that we need to ask when building these components. Here's an example of a Webflow component, right? So that's these green ones that we see here, which I'm sure you're aware of. How we utilize a component for both scalability and flexibility. And the distinction is flexibility has got to do with the change in structure. Scalability is generally the styling of something, right? How it looks. And can I manage that on a lot of pages? Flexibility is how quickly can I change the structure of this thing into different ways of looking at it that the client might want to look at. In this case, it would be super easy if the client wanted this to be 4 columns, right? Bam, right? So that's something that is super flexible. And that's just because we've got one testimonial component grid, and then we can change that on all 4, like all pages that this shows up, bam, it's going to change it everywhere. One thing, and we're working out the distinctions on this currently, but in this case, let's say they want to remove the name, or they want to remove the images from all case studies. Oh my God, that means we have to go, testimonial cards. That means we have to go through every single page and we have to update that on all of them. Like, meaning we have to remove that element, where if we create a component, then that enables us to simply delete that part of the component, and it's going to remove that element from the structure of every other component. So that's part of something being scalable and flexible, if that makes sense. Flexible, we can change the structure of it, and it's going to change the structure and the elements that exist within that structure on multiple different places. So the way that we use for example, cards like this is going to be like quote text, author name, author position, author image, the link text, and the link itself. And so we just create overrides. So we can see here that we've just overridden that. We can simply, we change this, right? It's going to override that in the component. So that's one example there of managing something that is more scalable and flexible. Okay, something we use on every single project, and it's probably one of the main things that doesn't really change on any project, is our page structure. This goes back to Client First, but we have our page wrapper. Our page wrapper, we have set to minimum height is 100 vertical height. Flex vertical. The reason we do flex vertical is so that the footer, we can have auto top margin, and it will, it will push it down so that the footer is always at the bottom of the page. So page wrapper. Why would we have a page wrapper? If I show you a project without a page wrapper, you'll instantly understand why. If we want to copy and paste this page to another page, how do we do that if it's not in a page wrapper? You have to go through and copy every single individual section, and it's such a freaking headache. So page wrapper wraps the whole page so you can easily copy and paste across. Then we have our main wrapper. The main wrapper is what, the content is in, right? This is what all the content is in. Ideally, we try to not have the nav in there. In some cases we have to, but the main wrapper is what the page content is in. And that way you can have the footer, or if you've got pop-ups or global styles or other things that aren't necessarily involved in the content, you can have that outside of that main wrapper. Then from the main wrapper, we've got sections. So every section is labeled section _ name of section. And then the other one that we have is padding global. So padding global set to 5%. This is just so that every single section has padding either side. We use %. I found that to be the easiest way to do it. 5% all the way from desktop, tablet, mobile, done. Right? And we use this on every single section, unless, of course, we don't want padding and we want it to hit the edges, then we remove that. Then we have container large. And container large is basically just the container that we'll use on 99% of all the sections. So it'll be section, padding global, container large, and then from there, whatever you want to be in there, that changes and is so various. But that there is the main structure: section, padding global, container large, and those sections are in the main wrapper, which is the body content. And then you've got the page wrapper, which is wrapping that. These are used on every single one of our projects. And the only time this breaks is when we have really unique designs or things that fall outside of that, the normal kind of, basic structures. And there's many, many cases where this comes in, but the main thing you want to be asking, or the main thing that we're starting to ask, are these two main questions, which is, what happens if we build 100 of these? How are we going to change something on 100 of these? That's really the main question. So what does it look like if there's 100 of these? And what happens if the client wants to change this? All right. So every time we're building elements now, we're thinking that question: 100 of these, and what is the client going to ask for? What if they ask to remove the heading? What if they ask to, turn it into a different type of grid style? What if they ask for it to be horizontal and not vertical? How can it be as flexible and as scalable as possible? Now, once you figure something like that out, you're going to want to keep it, right? You don't want to have to rethink that every time you build a new project, which is why you have a project starter that is regularly being updated. We actually have also like a little component library as well where we add stuff. But a good example of this is our Flow Gurus base template, where there's a blog, have a blog page set up. And in here, we've already got the blog CMS set up, and we have the blog cards, those little cards that appear on like 99% of blogs. They're already here. So let's just say let's make this a grid, 3 columns, so it's easier to see. So as an example, one thing I've noticed on a lot of sites is that you'll have a blog card, and sometimes you want to have padding on everything, and sometimes you only want to have padding on the bottom part of the card. So long story short, the point I was trying to make, I just kind of shot myself in the foot there. But as an example, in here, blog card image wrapper, blog card content, post info block. We use these classes across the entire site anywhere that there is a card, like a blog card. We don't use different elements for this. Like, these are the classes for blog cards. We've built it once. We've figured out that, having margin auto on this ensures that they're all the same height. Everything is just perfectly done so that we don't have to do it again, if that makes sense. So that's something I highly recommend. If you build something like this, which works really well for you, I would save that element so that you don't have to rethink and ask those questions again. And hey, share it with the community, because these, scalable elements and reusable elements are absolutely so useful. So that's an example there of how we actually update our starter project as well. We'll just pop things in there. Or instead of updating the starter project, I have this small project in here called components. And in here, a great example that I actually use quite a lot is a page called pop-ups. And you can see here, I've got hero headers, FAQs, things that are like scrolling, animations, a date picker, things that took me a lot of time to figure out. I've made sure that I've saved them in one place. Pop-ups as an example, right? These are, for me, I always have a lot of trouble getting these dialed in. What happens if you click outside? If I click outside or click this, everything works just nicely. The classes are there. So all I do is just copy that in to the project and it's done. But I've built this once. I saved it in my component library and then use it when I need on projects. That's an example of things being stackable, reutilizing things so that you can then deploy it in other projects. And now something that's happening is that we start updating the team. And this is very new to us, but now when we have new components and new things that the whole team can use, we'll start updating the team so that everyone else has access to those new tools. But that is how we are currently seeing our styling and structuring when it comes to building Webflow sites. And it's just making sure that you have a structured way of approaching how you build inside of Webflow that is going to make sure that if you build 100 of these pages, if you build 100 of these elements and the client wants to ask for changes, is it going to be easy for you to change? That is the golden question. Hope that was useful for you. If you have any tips or tricks that you learn along the way at making more scalable and flexible and reusable assets and naming conventions, please feel free to share. I would love to hear about them myself.